Okay, so some of the industry. So as everyone knows this, the industry, the entertainment industry, what we're pitching our stuff for, the whole thing has changed a lot. It's constantly changing. Anyone who's like, I know exactly what's going on with the industry right now, well, they're already out of date because it's already changed. It's changing constantly. And I don't mean that facetiously in any way. I mean like there's new stuff happening all the time. There was this thing called Quibi that just was like gonna take everything by storm and then was gone, right? So the industry changes, is constantly in flux. So this is both good and bad news. Let me talk to you real quick about pen makers. Probably didn't expect to hear about pen makers in a pitching class, but here we are. So pen making was a skill back in the day. So when you buy like men's dress shirts and there's probably tons of other things that have these, but you get tons of little pins in the shirts, right? Well, the used to in order to make those pins, like a really skilled craftsperson could make about 12 in an hour. That was like really good, and they got paid really well because those pins are pretty necessary. And then someone made a machine that could make about 10,000 pins in a day. And all of a sudden, you had these people who were like super skilled, who had like, apprenticed and worked for years to be really good at pen making, and essentially they were obsolete. They were now machine runners. They ran a machine for almost nothing. And no one thinks twice about it. No one's like mad, like, oh, those pen makers, we need to find them, high paying skilled job. No one cares, right? Once the industry changes, it's unapologetic to the old skills. So obviously, in our industry, this has definitely happened. Where like Kodak used to make a lot of money off Hollywood, and now pretty much nothing. Other than Tarantino, no one shoots on real film anymore. So if you were really good back in the day of like physically cutting or treating film or developing film, that was a really cool skill to have in the 80s, and now it is obsolete. And then television, the most popular shows in the last 20 years on American television don't hold a candle to the numbers that people used to get on shows that weren't even that popular in the 70s, the 60s, the 80s, because there was only like 3 channels. And so even though there was a less population, way more people were watching, Beverly Hillbillies or whatever than The Sopranos, which if you're a film nerd, if you like love the literature and video form that I'm sure we all do, you're like, that's insane. But like quality doesn't have of like, oh, this is really good, didn't mean it got more viewers. And that's so that's nuts, right? Here's another example. This is a great story that I saw an interview with Steve Carell. His first movie was Curly Sue, which was John Hughes' last film. And he was a waiter. I barely remember this movie, and he was talking about how he was a waiter in like one scene. He had no lines. He just had like a reaction shot. He was on set for 3 days because back then, and the Curly Sue wasn't even that long ago. It was like mid 90s, I think, mid to late 90s. And, we just spent a lot more money on making movies back then. So, like nowadays, that's saying if you're a waiter on set for one day, you probably, you wouldn't even be on for the whole day. You'd be on for a few hours and then like, good, we got it. We're moving on. So the good news is we have options that people before us didn't have. And I think this is both good and bad news because, we can pretty much do whatever we want. We don't need permission anymore. We can make the web series. We can shoot the proof of concept. We can do all these things. But there's no, just because we can do them, it's like now we have to do all the motivation ourselves. We're not waiting to be picked as much as we have to choose ourselves in order to do things. So what I want to ask you is, when it comes to pitching, what are you aiming for? Are you aiming to please the industry, or are you aiming to please a fan base? And it may sound like those two things are the same, but they're not really. We're talking about 2 terms here, a linchpin and a brand. A linchpin is, and there's a lot of crossover here, but like it is helpful to separate these terms. So a linchpin is essentially someone who is like the go-to for a particular thing. Like you're looking to hire someone who's, I don't know, like the best furniture maker in a 30-mile radius. There's probably only one, and that person, like if you want the best, you go to that person, and that's that, right? Whereas a brand is someone who cultivates their own market. So we'll kind of break those down. Uh, Regardless of what you do, it's going to take a lot of work. So you're probably thinking, I'm no stranger to hard work, which is great because this industry requires just a lot of self motivation, a lot of putting in the time. Risking failure, what we're doing is we're essentially trying to predict the future. We're trying to say, hey, this thing that I made or whatever is like it's gonna be successful. People are gonna like it. It's like we don't know. We don't know. We're risking failure. Anything, even some of the best ideas out there can fail. There's no map. Please don't look for a map. I did this for decades. I was like, what are the steps? Just tell me the steps to do and I'll do it. Because in school, you told me the steps to do and I would crush it. Because, get the A on the test or project or whatever. Because there was like specific instructions. You just follow those, done. We don't have those. There are examples, though, and we're going to look at a number of those examples today. So let's talk about linchpin. What is a linchpin? Again, there's going to be a lot of crossover, but if you think about it, like, I need one of the best interviewers in the world to interview this high-profile person. Okay, Oprah's probably going to be on that list, right? I need someone who's going to who's going to produce this television show, who knows what they're doing. Chuck Lorre, Shonda Rhimes, they'll probably be on your list, right? Because, like, when you think, like, crime dramas, Shonda Rhimes is right up there. When you think sitcoms, Chuck Lorre's right up there. Things like that. These are the people that we think of. They're the go-tos. Okay? When you're a linchpin, you got to give your work all that you got. Again, that hard work thing, right? You got to pour your heart, your soul, all your energy into it. You're making a conscious choice to overcome fears when you're a linchpin, because you're like, I'm going to niche myself into this thing and I'm going to be the best darn version of that thing that I can get. It is opposite of conformity. So in the same way there's no map, there's no instructions on how to do it, a linchpin cannot look exactly like another linchpin, because if they were the same, they wouldn't be linchpins, and you'd have multiple people doing it, right? You wouldn't be as special. Be a lot of fear, because you're basically you're saying something that you could be wrong. You're saying, let's say you want to say, I want to be the best game show producer. Probably no one in here is that, but let's just say that example. I want to be the best game show producer out there. Cool. Well, you might not make it, right? There's a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of fear that's going to come with that. Giving a lot, just this idea of, in order for people to expect a lot out of you, you need to cultivate a reputation, which means you're going to have to create a lot of work. And a lot of that work in the beginning, when you don't have a reputation, is going to be for free. Here's a story about, I don't know this writer personally, and I don't know how to pronounce the Danny Messerschmidt, I'm guessing, wrote a Brooklyn Nine-Nine script couple of years, 3 years ago, that got viral. It went viral. It was it was a spec script. She didn't work for Brooklyn Nine-Nine or anything, but she was thinking about a Brooklyn Nine-Nine, a script about the case of the Golden Shower, where Trump was a character in it, and someone peed on him or something, and I don't know that, I don't think Brooklyn Nine-Nine hired her, but as a writer, she created something that all of a sudden, she didn't know it was going to work. For all I know, she thought it was a joke, but it went wind up going viral. Aiming at a target. So this is a big deal for being a linchpin. It's like, you got to say, I'm going, again, if we're going to the game show idea, I'm going to be the game show producer. So I've got a target that I'm aiming for. And for me, it really helps to separate the word target and the word goal, because the word goal is, if I don't accomplish this exact thing, then I failed. Whereas target is, I'm aiming for something, and whatever happens along the way, the new changes and whatnot, I'm still aiming at this target, but I'm able to shift with what's going on. A linchpin says no. So this is huge. If you are the best horror script writer, if you have cultivated yourself to be I'm the linchpin for, you need a horror script adaptation of a novel, I'm your person. And someone's like, hey, I've got this romantic comedy, can you help punch it up? And you're like, nope, that's not my brand. And that is scary as hell, because you're like, I want to take every piece of work that someone throws my way. Linchpins say no. They say no a lot. And not just about type of work, but specific. So this is Mike Nichols in the upper left, who directed The Graduate. It was his first big movie. He had been a performer, comedic performer before this. And he really like was loved being able to direct this. He had all these ideas, and he had the idea that he wanted the entire soundtrack, the whole thing, all the songs to be Simon and Garfunkel. And the studio pushed back, and they were like, "No, you got to have variety. No one has just one band do all the soundtrack to a movie." And he said, "No." He said, "If you don't let me have this, I'm out." And it was his first movie. They could have said no, and we could have never heard of Mike Nichols again. Who knows, right? But they said yes. Right? He took a risk. Right? And the last thing is you got to be in charge of your own career. You cannot like wait for someone else to tell you what to do. Which we all want someone to tell us. At least I do. I want someone to tell me what to do, because then I'd be off the hook. Well, I just did what that person told me to do, right? This whole idea of, I don't know if anyone else had this, but like growing up, I really living nowhere near Hollywood. I believe that there was these things called agents, and what agents did was they said, "Kid, I'll make you a star. You know, you hop on board with me, and I'll take care of everything. You just act." And like that is such a dream for so many actors. Are like, all I can do is act, and you'll take care of the rest. And it's like, I don't know that anyone's actually ever had that story, but it's certainly not one to aim for. And it's the same with scripts, right? This idea of, like, oh, I've got a script. I'm just going to put it out there, and someone will find it. There's a slush pile or whatever. And it's like, yeah, there might be slush piles, but agents have way more scripts than they have time to read. Producers have way more scripts than they have time to read. Actors have more scripts. Everyone has more scripts on their desk, or virtually in their inbox or whatever, than they have time to read, right? So you can't just put a script out there and hope someone will find it like some gold on the beach. Okay, so let's talk about James Bond. So James Bond films have been around for quite a long time. Who writes them? Now, I think I've seen every James Bond film, or almost all of them. I have no idea who writes them, so I had to look this up. A lot of people were writing on Spectre, which I don't know how they missed the mark because it wasn't that great. But a lot of people were on it, and I was like, oh, some of these people write a lot of these. So some of the same people, as you can see, John Logan, Neil Purvis, Robert Wade, boom. You get Neil Purvis, Robert Wade, boom, right there in Casino Royale. So let's look at Neil Purvis. He's written a lot of James Bond films. He also wrote Johnny English, which is kind of a James Bond spoof-ish kind of comedy movie. But, Neil Purvis, I've never heard of Neil Purvis before I looked him up about this because I was curious who wrote James Bond films. Same with this guy, Robert Wade. Clearly they work together a lot. They have a lot of the same credits. Do I care? Am I going to see a James Bond movie, or is anyone going to see a James Bond movie because Robert Wade and Neil Purvis worked on it? Maybe they're friends, but I don't think most people care, right? The industry cares though, because if you're a producer assigned to help get the new James Bond film off the ground, you probably want to know Robert Wade and Neil Purvis and a few other people who've worked on all these before, right? So they're not cultivating a fan base. Because, like, as I said, very few of us probably know who these people are. But they're a linchpin to the industry because they have a niche. They write James Bond films. All right, let's talk about Scott Derrickson. If you haven't heard of him, he's a director. He did Hellraiser Inferno, Deliver Us from Evil, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, Day the Earth Stood Still. So you're seeing a theme here. Like, there's a lot of horror going on, a lot of dark kind of material. So when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was looking for someone to direct Doctor Strange, they went to this guy. He'd never directed a superhero film before, but they didn't want someone who directed superhero films. They wanted someone who could give this kind of dark, magic, horror kind of thing, right? So Scott Derrickson didn't start out his career with all these movies thinking, oh man, I hope one day I'll get to write a Marvel movie or direct a Marvel movie. But it worked out because they looked for a linchpin in the industry and they said, oh, this guy's done all the stuff we're looking for. Boom. I didn't go see Doctor Strange or any of these movies actually because of Scott Derrickson. Again, never heard of him before I put together this presentation, but clearly a linchpin in the industry. So being a linchpin is not the same as job security, right? So the people who were those pin makers, they were linchpins, but once things happened, boom, they're not anymore, right? So here's a personal story for me. I wrote for Epic Rap Battles of History. If you've never heard of it, it's a YouTube series, been around for a while, and they take two people from history and they rap battle them together. And I got the privilege to work on 6 or 7. I get to write 6 or 7 episodes of that, and I was on cloud nine. I was writing comedy, hip hop for a channel that I liked, using history. I felt great about it. And then one day, a video came out that I didn't have anything to work on. I was like, oh, they didn't ask me to work on that. Okay, interesting. I found out it's because they started a Patreon. Now, I want to just go clear the record. I'm still friends with everyone at Epic Rabbit House. They're awesome. I'm not like bitter or anything. But what they did was they changed their business model to where if you are on their Patreon account, part of the benefit that you pay for by being a Patreon member for them is you get to, at least for some tiers, you get to help write lyrics. You can submit lyrics that they use. So now, and I think this is absolutely genius, they went from paying writers to getting paid by writers. And as much as I miss that job, like if I was in their shoes, I'd 100% do it. Like they're getting paid money for something they used to pay for. That's fantastic. Good on them. And if you'd like to follow me for anything else, I teach pitching, I teach improv, I teach stand-up, I teach a number of things, and you can find me at Rich Baker Coaching on Facebook and Instagram. So, thank you very much. So this...